All right, we are recording.
Beautiful. We can figure out this technology. All right. So today's agenda, first one is licensing. I know there's some comments here about is there anything for TAC to do here? And no, there's not, except that it does affect the working groups quite a bit. And not everyone has been involved in this discussion. A lot of this conversation has been happening over in the governing board planning committee, I think is what we call it now. And so I just wanted to kind of bring this up for awareness around the proposal to add in MIT licensing such that the best practices badge and the CVE benchmarking tool can use MIT license and not just Apache. And then there's this overarching discussion that needs to happen around, do we have sort of exceptions to what licensing or permissions for various licenses that we want to allow working groups to use without having to go through this like review process, right? Try to make this a little bit easier for folks. So I just wanted to bring that up, but yes, it is being moved to the governing board for them to figure out legalese and decide on and all that, but people of the TAC, be aware. If you have any comments on that, feel free to bring them up now, but otherwise we can move on. There's also an issue tagging this number 26. So if you have comments, feedback, go ahead and add those there.
Ryan, if I may.
Sure.
I suspect one reason is to give an opportunity. Does anyone in the TAC object to best practices and CVE benchmarking using the MIT license?
No.
Okay. So I think that basically it goes up to the governing board, but now we can officially say there's a TAC meeting and no one objected.
Perfect, thank you. And for those that don't know, Apache and MIT are almost identical. I think there's like one difference with patents being granted automatically or something like that, but that's about it. All right, so the next thing is the charter template update / removal. So Dan, I know you'd sent an email regarding this about just go ahead and removing charter MD from the templates and from the working groups that are using it, which I think is actually a great idea. We've discussed this a little bit before. This is basically boilerplate that was intended to be customized. We haven't customized it, and now it's creating more confusion for people. So we did do some work around the READMEs to sort of simplify the working groups' definitions and what their charters are and that sort of thing. But as far as the actual charter itself, we haven't done any work on that. And right now it's extremely heavy-handed. It talks about like technical steering committees, and it defines which, excuse me, which license you're supposed to use, things like that. So I think the proposal here, Dan, and feel free to jump in here, is to just go ahead and remove it for now, and then work through these issues separately.
Yeah, correct. I did a quick look and didn't see any changes anybody had made to them in their own working group repos. So I think it's just sitting there as an artifact from when they got created.
Yeah, that's exactly
yeah, we wouldn't just go force delete these. We would send pull requests and make sure the working groups are aware.
Yes.
You know, one quick thought related to the licensing is, even though that template does, it specifies that they should be released using Apache 2, kind of the formal thing that needs to be done is that the repositories need, I think they're SPDX files. I forget what the exact format for that file is, and that should list the licensing. So, so I'd say from a licensing perspective, it's fine to remove the charter template, but we should make sure that for those groups that are intending to use Apache 2, well, for all groups, we make sure that we have the SPDX file in there indicating the license.
So I think that's normally like license.md for if you've got code, and then for like other written artifacts, it's the like CCBY, we're using like 3.0.
Yeah, let's see. So where I read it was from the, Ryan, if you wouldn't mind clicking on that issues 26, so we can see that. And if you scroll down to the place where I pasted in the language from the charter template, further down still. here. Now, at the very bottom, so 6D, it says contributed files should contain license information such as SPDX short form identifiers indicating the open source license or licenses.
Yeah, so it'd be like at the top of each file, you'd have like a little SPDX identifier that says Apache 2.
Licensed by : SPDX identifier. And in the case of a whole repo, you would typically also include the entire license in a license.md file. And I think that would fully meet the intention of D.
Okay.
So I think when we do these pull requests to remove the charter.md, we can also add license.md if it doesn't already exist. And since they're all Apache 2 right now, that should be fairly straightforward. So then the next question becomes, does somebody want to volunteer to do this for each one of the working groups, or should we just send mail to each working group to have them do it? And I think I know the likelihood of it getting done if we send mail. So any volunteers?
I just sent the PR to remove it from the template. So.
Oh, perfect. Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments on that before we move on? All right. Making good progress today. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is the technical vision. So I know we've discussed this a little bit in past meetings. So to kind of formalize the conversation a little bit here, we've created an issue to start tracking this. So this got brought up a little bit in yesterday's planning committee. And so where we're really kind of thinking around what this technical vision needs to be is a 3 to 5 year, like really high level type vision. So this isn't the list of items that we're going to do for the year or anything like that. That's going to be a separate roadmap that'll get created. But this should be this sort of inspirational type thing that we can leverage to sort of define what it is that Open Ssf is contributing and sort of the purpose of that. So Kay had mentioned that someone else had given her this idea around, you know, a guideline to define this is what has changed in the next 3 to 5 years because Open Ssf exists, right? So if we put it kind of within those parameters, like, do we say, you know, 90% of, you know, repos created now have security process and, you know, whatever that is, some like really high level thing. But we need to take into account what our current working groups do, and then also what we could be doing, right? And so sort of lump all of that together. So this issue here is sort of trying to pull all that together and then as an attempt to create sort of a mechanism for us to have these conversations instead of waiting every 2 weeks. We can start discussing this here. So I took from the mail that I had sent previously a couple of weeks ago around the categorization of working groups for educate, inform, protect, put that in here. We have the timeline for when we need to have this done, which is for the press release that's going out in January. So we need to have a review ideally in 2 weeks for that first draft. And then we can have comments on it over a month, basically, because I realize that it's winter holidays and people are going to be in and out. So we need to take probably a good 4 weeks to actually iterate on that. And then we can get that approved for the final press release. So first one, questions, comments around define this vision, what it is, what the purpose is, anything like that. Rob, you're the only one I could see and you're shaking your head no, so I'm going to go with there's no questions. Perfect. And then as far as timeline goes, is there any concerns around being able to get a draft put together within the next 2 weeks? And remember, this is not meant to be a like 3-page thing. This should be like maybe a couple sentences that's, you know, here's our motto type thing.
I think it's more than a couple sentences. I would say it's 1 to 2 pages. So I think it looks like, you know, there's a paragraph of preamble, and then there are, you know, maybe 5 to 6 statements of here's how the world has changed because of what we've done. So, you know, developers have, you know, start projects using secure what's the word I'm looking for, sort of secure defaults, companies or developers can control their, I'm just giving some examples, but developers can control the dependencies they use based on security parameters, you know, a few things like that, sort of, you know, the high level principles, and then another paragraph summary. So that's how I am envisioning it looking. Does that make sense?
Are you envisioning just text, or like a 2 or 3 page slide deck, which is how I originally thought this would be, but I mean, that's fine too.
I think both. So I think it's, you know, starts with text, and then we do a short slide deck in addition.
But
And
you
the slide deck.
want,
the
I would
text is
suggest pick. I would suggest pick one or the other. Here is the vision, and in the one form.
Okay, then I would say text.
Okay.
Mhm.
So it's you know, something that we can put up on the website and people can click through, and it's a document.
So I kind of
Oh.
envision that similarly in that text or slide deck's fine. It doesn't matter to me. But the actual vision itself, I didn't think would be 2 to 3 pages. Now I could see the explanation leading up to it and our thought process around it, almost like a blog post, could be longer, but I would be a little concerned about 2 to 3 pages of vision that someone has to read to get an idea of what it is that OpenSSF is aspiring to do.
Okay,
Just to be clear, when I said 2 to 3 pages, I meant slides. So if you're doing text, I totally agree with you.
Oh, 2 or 3 slides. Yeah, I'm on board. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So sounds like we're talking similar anyway.
But you're talking like an organizational vision statement where you would only have a couple sentences. Like the goal of this organization is to XYZ. And so you've got it in like the 5-second nutshell.
That is how I pictured it. But I certainly see, Kate, like your point of there's some thought process around how we arrived at that, and it's sort of the landscape and, you know, that kind of thing is, but the actual vision itself is that, like, you know, like you said, just sort of this couple, 1 paragraph sentence, multiple sentence thing that's like, here's our organizational statement. This is why we exist. This is what we're aspiring to do. But it should be succinct.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I think we already have the, you know, 1 to 2 sentence, what we're aspiring to do. That's, you know, that's in our charter, and then we've got our tagline around that too. So I'm thinking to go 1 level deeper than that, which is what's the, you know, again, maybe in, you know, 5 to 6 ways, what's changed, what's different, how are developers' lives different because of the work we've done, you know, how are developers' lives, or how are companies' lives, or, you know, either the producers or the consumer software, what's different because of what we've done. So I really see it as more like 1 to 2 pages, you know, a statement of, you know, here's how we're changing the world, and, you know, here's how the technology that comes out of this group is, you know, is changing the world.
So I like the concept of kind of mapping of where we want to get to in that slightly longer form. I don't know that it's that long. I mean, we can write it and see how it goes, right? That's kind of more that than anything else. But like, I don't think we necessarily need a preamble. I don't think this is the strategy. I think, Ryan, in that issue, you have another issue links to actually develop a broader strategy. Why don't we just try writing and see how long it goes? But I think we're all kind of aligned that it's no more than 3 pages and probably at least a paragraph is kind of where we're landing. Is that fair?
Okay.
Approach.
I'm good with that.
Yeah,
And it sounds like not everyone here knows that thing that you've mentioned in the charter, Kay. Is that something that we need to review or revisit if people aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, so it's worth doing that. It's let's see, do we want to do that right now, or maybe just link it into this issue? Ryan, if you could, you know, if you browse to the charter, it's in the beginning of the charter.
Yeah, sorry. Zoom is causing difficulties with me being able to navigate here. Hold on. Okay, there we go. All right. So which charter was it?
So if you go to the OpenSSF website, yeah.
Oh, the website. That one.
You could probably get to it from here too, but I usually get it from the website. And then under community, and then governance, and then so let's see, the funding charter.
That's a problem.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I think the link is wrong. If you click the actual file, it works though.
It's up here. Is it this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should fix that. There we go.
Okay. So it's the mission. So I'm looking at the mission. It's up there a little farther. It's right at the start.
Oh, at the start. No, it went right back.
Yeah. So this is the mission of the Open SSF. Is to inspire and
Okay.
enable the community to secure the open source software we all depend on.
Yeah, so this, I think like mission is great for the overall organization. I don't think what we're trying to do is in competition with this. I think it's more like, okay, take this and give it some more like technical, concrete. It's still aspirational, right? But give it more of the specifics of the technical, like what is it we're aspiring to do? Like this is great, but it's really high level, right?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I think we're on the same page, Ryan. I just, when you were saying 1 to 2 sentences, I was thinking, you know, all you can get through in 1 to 2 sentences is something like this. So as long as we're, you know, sort of somewhere in the range of, you know, a paragraph with maybe some bullet points to up to 3 pages, why we're totally on the same page.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that sounds good to me.
Yeah, I got concerned when he said like 2 pages, and I'm envisioning like 2 pages of this, right? Describing our technical vision. I'm like, that's a little wordy, I think. But yeah, it sounds like maybe we're on the same page. It's just we were describing it slightly differently. Okay, so everyone's okay with that approach? Oh, to answer your question, Dan, I think I admitted everybody that was in the lobby.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so what's our next step then? What are you thinking, Ryan?
Okay, so if we get back to this issue, so what I'd like to do is, let's open up all new pages. Hold on. Oh, come on. So if we go back to this issue, what I'd like to start doing is filling out what we think belongs in here in order to get to a draft. So if people have strong opinions about it, otherwise, you know, put them in here. Otherwise, what I think we could do is just take the ideas that are here, start a draft, drop it in here. I don't know if Kay, you want to help with that. I could do it. If anybody else is passionate about writing, you know, that we can just start a draft here and start iterating and commenting. I personally prefer that we do it here in the issue because I'm noticing there's less conversation that happens when we do it in documents. But if people feel strongly about one or the other, you know, please speak up. So.
I had a question.
Yes.
Are you looking to define the technical vision for this committee or the Open SSF at large?
So the goal of the TAC is to define the vision for Open SSF at large.
Awesome.
Right?
Thank
So
you.
So the idea here, I think, is that whatever this vision becomes or gets defined as, will one be inspirational in creating new work groups, can help us decide how work groups should coordinate together and achieve, you know, working towards an overarching goal, right? It should be sort of that framework that kind of pulls everything together. So that's really the objective here. But if there's no volunteers, I'm happy to start a paragraph to drop in here.
I would be happy. I'd be happy to help if you'd like.
Yeah, anybody that wants to participate, I'm happy. I'd appreciate the help. So I'm happy to just drop something in here and get the ball rolling, and then we can all just party on it. That works for me.
Okay. Just say where you're going to put it, and I will try to give an assist.
All right, I'll drop it in here. So unless folks want to work in a document, but I really like working here. So.
Okay, which here are we talking about? So
Oh,
it's
sorry,
clear to me.
what's on the screen here in this issue?
Okay, so you want to basically propose a text right in this issue, and then people respond to it that way?
Yeah, so basically, I was noticing that in some of the other issues, like around licensing and around the life cycle, things like that, there's some really great conversations happening there where people were just putting in exactly what they thought it should be and then iterating. And I thought it was great because it was almost like you could see the versions and the evolution of it happening versus a document where things kind of just disappear. So, so I'll go ahead and I'll drop that in there, and then anybody's welcome to participate in it. So. Cool. And then once we get that in there, we can review that at the next TAC meeting, and then we can use the next few weeks to iterate on it, leading up to the press release.
I think by the, just a quick note, I think by the next TAC meeting, it would be good if we have it in a document. So I feel like we can use the issue to share information, but at some point we want it in a document. So maybe we iterate in the issue for a week and then put thoughts into a document the following week, or
is that just to memorialize it, or like what's the intention of having it in a document, like to share it out, or?
Yeah, well, eventually we want it as a document. So I mean, we'll probably make it be documented inside of a web page or text on a web page, but
because I was really thinking that ultimately, like depending on how large this ends up being, this would either be a chunk of text right on the TAC repos README file, or a link to another, MD file that is the vision that can be, incorporated in numerous places. So that's the reason I'm pushing back on the document, is because I see it existing elsewhere. But if there's other reasons for having the document, totally open.
I think it's an interesting point, because this keeps coming up, not just in this context. We just need to be clear where final versions of things live. In my opinion, we iterate in things in issues and in Google Docs, and the final versions of things are published to a file on GitHub. And then I think we've already decided that the official communications come from the email list. So like, if that's not the case, or if that is the case, maybe we should document it, because we keep having the exact same discussion.
So I think I'm actually in agreement with you around saying that ultimately this stuff is being published as a file on GitHub. I guess I'm leaving the iteration up to personal preference if people want to use a document to do that versus
Sure.
the GitHub issue. I just like the issue for it because I'm noticing I see better conversations happening there. But totally open to, if there's some other really strong reason to use a document. I'm not seeing a lot of traction when we use documents. So
I think if you're going to go into multiple pages, you need to use a document, because that's just too much for everybody to like, here's my version cut and pasted with some delta that's hard to see going issue to issue. But if you're really talking about just a few sentences, it's fine to use an issue.
I think that's a good point too. So I think maybe the right approach here then is, let's start in the issue, defining what the things are we want to talk about. And then if it grows into a document, we can move it. But if it ends up just being 2 paragraphs, maybe it can stay in the issue.
Yeah, but I think you need to memorialize a version. This is the vision, and put it in its own. I will say the word document, but a markdown file is a document.
Yeah.
Well, a markdown file is a document. So, a markdown file on GitHub is great.
Yeah. So I think once we reach that point where like, this is it, that then either gets put on the README and or that MD file on GitHub, and that's the official like, hey, it's done, and then we close this issue. I think what I want to try to avoid, and I think, Maya was kind of mentioning this as well, is that we don't want to have a Google Doc being the final thing that we then link to, right? It's like just MD file on GitHub, done, and there it is. Everybody can read it very easily. So, okay, so we're all in agreement for starting in the issue. If it grows, we can put it in a document if necessary. Otherwise, we'll just leave it as an MD file and go from there.
Perfect.
Cool. All right. Next issue is the working group life cycles. So there's been a lot of conversation in here, and I'm going to actually default to the people that are having the conversation. But let me pull it up real quick. I think we're pretty close. In fact, I saw a comment, I think from Dan Lawrence this morning around, let me find it, saying that there was a pretty good summary in there already, and I think we just need to kind of close it up. So is this the right one? Yeah. Oh, other Dan. Sorry, Dan Middleton.
Happy to get confused with Dan Lawrence. No issues there.
Yeah.
If it's like a loan statement.
All right, so yeah, so Dan's comment, this is what I saw come across in mail, so Maya's got a pretty good summary here. Let's see, let's find it. Oh yeah, okay.
The very bottom.
Is this the latest one? Yeah, okay.
Looks like it.
Do you want to walk through this, or I could read through it real quick, or?
Please go for it.
Okay. All right. So basically, it looks like we've got a couple of different phases here. So first off, there's incubating. So in order for a working group to become incubating, it needs to have one TAC sponsor. It goes to the TAC for vote for inclusion. So the TAC basically decides that, yes, we'll have a incubating working group. That TAC sponsor agrees to attend the working group meetings regularly, and the TAC sponsor does not have to have a formal role in the working group, like a chair. It's just they're there sort of observationally keeping track of things. They need to propose a scope that's reviewed by the TAC. So I think that falls into the updates that we put in the readme.md files. And that kind of helps us ensure that we're not having duplication of effort. They need to meet or have met at least 5 times. And then for those, meeting notes or recordings are all public. So same, modus operandi as we've got existing working groups. And then have at least 5 interested individuals from at least 3 different organizations attending regularly. This I totally agree with. I think there has been discussion in the past, and I don't want to get overly pedantic on this, but what does regularly mean?
Well, I have another, maybe a question before that, but if somebody's proposing a new working group, how can they have met? Are we expecting them to meet somewhere else, like ad hoc?
So, yeah, that's a funny question.
Is there a phase before this one?
So I think there's people are getting together and they're experimenting, right? And then at some point, then it becomes proposed. So once they've met, they've set these things up, right? Because anybody can set up a Zoom meeting, anybody can start creating documents, right? So do we need to really define what that is up front, or do we just say these people have been meeting and getting together, and then this is where OpenSSF officially becomes interested?
That seems fine to me, because I can imagine people using the TAC mail list to say, hey, I'd like to get a few people together to start talking about something, and either it comes together or it doesn't, or likewise in a working group, you could imagine people splintering out to take on some topic.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, my concern, and Dan, my pushback on that is just that if someone has a concern and they want to talk about a particular topic, but they're not actually getting together and doing anything about it, it's like, that's great. Like, nothing's going to change.
Right. Yeah, I think we just need to give people guidance on how they can start meeting or something like that before.
Yep.
Like, feel free to use our mailing list to advertise the meeting, use our Slack, that kind of stuff.
Agreed.
Yeah, because I guess one resource that we provide, and in this format we might be missing out on, is just enabling people to connect better. Like, I think that having listed meetings, for example, that are regularly announced and kept on our calendar and whatever is part of how we draw participation. So I like the idea of them having met enough to realize the scope of the problem, but I wonder if like meeting 5 times or something like that may be heavy-handed, just in the sense that a lot of the things that happen by us making it official maybe extends people's reach. And I wonder if having them have to meet so many times, like if they're meeting twice a month, 5 times is almost an entire quarter. I wonder if that would encourage them to not do it as part of OpenSSF. But like overall, I like this structure. I'm just wondering about the 5 times.
I like there being some cost, some substantial cost, because people have to be committed enough to actually follow through that working group to real artifacts. So if there's not, to take it to the opposite end of the spectrum, if there was no cost, and I know you're not suggesting that, but if there was no cost, then we would just end up with like 1,000 working groups that might not do anything.
Strong point.
So maybe, yeah, I agree with the cost thing, absolutely. Perhaps instead of saying met at least 5 times, we have them have a regularly scheduled cadence that they're meeting. Like, is the issue around the 5, or is it just around ensuring that they're meeting regularly? I guess is the real question.
For me, it's just the logistics of like having somebody set up something outside of this. And I think maybe that's the same thing Jennifer was saying. And then like, it's kind of hard. Like we have the shared calendar, we have these repos where we can advertise stuff. It's kind of prohibitive in some cases for people to figure out a way to, set up this recurring calendar invite and advertise in a way to get people in. But I think it's a chicken and egg problem, because if you just have one person who's interested in a topic and they create a working group and it turns out nobody else is interested, then that's kind of a waste. So maybe we can solve it just by helping people set up these meetings without calling it a formal working group or anything like that.
Something we have in another organization is a labs area that's set up to lower the bar for creating projects. But you could do something similar for working groups, where if you just had some sort of standing allocated, I don't know, pre-incubator, anybody could use that time, and all the facilities are set up for Zoom or whatever they need. They wouldn't have to go like invent a way to get people. You just have to advertise, hey, at the appointed incubation time, I want to start getting together people to talk about X.
Yeah, so that's an interesting idea. So basically you've got like a regularly scheduled lab meeting, if you will, and that's for new ideas to come together. And then what would happen is if you had multiples, and I doubt that probably happens too frequently, but that would be the only challenge, right? Of you have 2 competing groups trying to meet at the same time, but then they could splinter off if it really became something interesting.
Yeah.
Just an idea. Is my audio okay? I've got a new laptop.
Yep, you sound great.
Sorry, thank you. Just needed to check that. So it's Luke. I was just thinking, there's nothing to stop them creating their own repo somewhere outside and then using that to talk, raise issues. And then when they feel they are of the right level that they want to go forward with a proposal to become a working group, then we can have a look at their repo. We can see, what activities there, do they have a diverse set of collaborators that are working on the proposal? And there'll be a little bit of a history there. They can create requests and check files in and do various things. And then that repo could then be just migrated into OSSF.
Yeah, I think that just plus making it clear that we're fine with people advertising these type of meetings on our Slack, maybe in our calendar, that kind of stuff would be sufficient. I can see people not wanting to come into the OpenSSF Slack and ask people to come attend their other meeting that's not affiliated with the OpenSSF. That could get a little weird if we don't make it clear that that's welcome.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. So if I totally agree with Luke as well, like having that repo set up will definitely help. So if people want to go, which they're probably going to want to do anyway, right? But so if they're doing actual work, we can have that. We can make that as part of the review process to look and see what they've been doing. We can help, and like Dan Lorenz is saying, that let people know, yes, feel free to use our channels to advertise that you've got this other working, you're working towards becoming a working group in OpenSSF. If folks are interested in joining, we can help get it scheduled if necessary, that kind of thing. And then that way people are encouraged to explore new ideas. And then when they're ready, they can propose them to the TAC and we can help start formulating or formalizing them.
And what we could even do is just have a markdown file somewhere where they can make a pull request to add their potential project, their potential working group. They can just put in some links and details about how they meet and where their repo is. And so it's almost like a staged area for them to put themselves on the map.
I could see the TAC having a markdown file, like you said, in our repo that is the sort of pre-incubating lab projects.
Yeah,
I like that idea.
If I can propose something from kind of what I'm hearing as summaries here, we could have a allow, to their points, allow projects to, or sorry, working groups to communicate on our Slack and on our mailing lists. It sounds like we're not leaning towards the open video option, but maybe we are. And then we should still discuss what the minimum number of meetings, if any, is as part of this charter. And we should also discuss if there needs to be a repo, for example. Like if somebody meets a couple times, but they don't have a repo, but they have, you know, a Google Doc, it's probably good enough, but like that's, you know, for us to decide as well. To the earlier point, what you want to do is create a GitHub issue template where somebody could just fill in all the info and request to be, you know, formally reviewed by the TAC or something like that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I like having the issue template for folks to easily fill out. I agree. They don't, a repo is not required. It's like if they have one, it'd be super useful, and they're encouraged to go create them, and then we can migrate them in. But absolutely, depending on the nature of the work, a document might be enough. That could be what's getting produced, right? It doesn't. It's not always going to be code, or the document could just be the start. So I think whatever makes sense for that area of exploration, right? They can do that, and then once it becomes formal, right, then we can set them up with actual repos and things like that under OpenSSF. So from what I heard from what you just said, Maya, I think the only open question was around the meeting times. Are people cool with leaving it at 5 for now, or specifying met at least 5 times and or has a regular cadence meeting at least once a month, or, you know, something like that? Or are we good with this for now? And we can always update those too if we start to see that people just aren't, like, things are getting created and dying, right? We can make this a little bit more stringent.
Yeah, I'm fine with this for now.
Cool. All right.
I think something that might have gotten dropped from conversations earlier is, what does it actually mean? Like, what does it mean to be incubating or graduated? What do you get as the working group? So this is just a bunch of things they have to do.
So I think that's what Maya's got here defined, in that once incubating, first she's got, you know, part of quarterly TAC reviews, right? README is complete. Okay, meets on a regular cadence. So here you operate as part of OpenSSF, has access to community resources like Zoom, YouTube channels, and can request funding and other resources, you know, subject to approval. So that's, I think that's the what and the why.
So, okay, yeah, so it's kind of 3 things there I'm seeing. You can operate as part of the OpenSSF, you have access to the community Zoom, and then you can request funding. But then I guess there's no equivalent for graduated. So why would anyone want to graduate?
I was going to ask about that too. That was the big question that I had was, so yeah, that all sounds great for incubating. Then once you're graduated, or how to become graduated, I have no issue with that. But once graduated, same, plus you have annual goals and metrics for success. Is there any other benefit, like, other than just having
just more homework?
Right.
Yeah, I struggle with this a little bit too, because if I look at the current working groups that we have, you know, they're moving forward, et cetera. Like, I think a lot of them I would call graduated, in terms of like, there's not much more direction the TAC should be expected to provide them.
Does it become more like graduated kind of means like self-sufficient, subject to less review? Because I always actually kind of had the wording of both of these sort of threw me off from since we started this conversation. Incubating to me always felt more like lab, like exploratory thing, and graduated was like, okay, we're working like what we have today, working groups, just by naming only, right? Happy to go with this, but that was just sort of my initial instinct was, oh, incubating sounds like something that's sort of getting started, but it's not real yet. Working groups that we have right now feel very real. And I terminology wise, I would say I agree. I would call that graduated. So then is there a question of another phase after, like the working groups that we have now, do they hit some other phase at some point? Are there, besides being done?
Yeah, I should quickly note that I think some of a number of these things are getting borrowed from the CNCF, which has an incubating and graduating level. And I think in some sense it's an intentional name calling to get people to do things that they weren't doing originally. I mean, for quite some time, Kubernetes and Prometheus, at least, well, I know at least Prometheus was incubating, millions of users, probably hundreds of millions of computers, and it was officially incubating. So, the incubating doesn't mean unused. It just means that we have criteria for that we would love to see projects to have, and giving them, the name incubating versus something else gives them a reason to try to do the other things.
Maybe a
I understand what you're
graduated.
saying. Yeah, the other question I had here was the names incubating graduated make more sense to me for projects, not necessarily working groups. Should we reconsider those names?
Yeah, and I guess we consider the need for 2 levels. I guess is that kind of what we're getting at?
Yeah, because it kind of seems like using current terminology, graduated has no meaning really, other than like dance extra homework. I think then the only other phase is the like retired, completed, whatever definition, where we can say, yeah, we've put this one out to field, it's done. Right.
The 2 levels still sort of make sense to me, but I don't know if we need to name them both. I could imagine the first level, which is access to resources in terms of like what we just talked through. And the second level being like, okay, you've put together a README, you put together a clear like definition of what the project, the working group's proposal is and all that kind of stuff. You're good to go, right? Most of our working groups together already today have done that. I would like us to formally review each of the working group charters. And then, assuming that review goes well, I think that group is good to go.
Yeah, I completely agree with the process that we've got here. I think it really comes down to naming, right? Incubating versus graduated. So do we want to review naming? Do we want to just keep it as is and everybody's okay with this? Personally, I find the naming confusing. That's me. But if other people are comfortable with it, I'm happy to keep it.
The second one still doesn't make sense to me, since it's just asking people to do more homework, I guess. Like putting my working group lead hat on, why would I do this?
Absolutely.
Why would I publish annual goals? Is it just so I can have a different name? I don't know that I would.
I see the 2 levels as just being, you've got the exploratory lab, and then you've got officially approved, operating ones. And so when I look at it that way, then the name seems weird. But yeah, to me, those are the 2 real ones.
Yep.
After that, yeah, it's just like, okay, put the checkbox. So any opinions on naming here? Do we want to just leave it as is, or we keep coming back to this?
Well, I guess there's not a lot of homework there if we did leave it that way. It's just once they've been up and running for a while, you've got a checkpoint to say that the TAC is going to say, all right, this working group is operating under community norms, and it seems to have not fizzled after it started. So it's official. It does seem like you would want something there that you take the incubating off the name.
Yeah, so Krob just put in the chat exactly what I was thinking. You have incubating, which is sort of the pre-exploratory one, and then you have active/operational is the like what working groups we have now. So I like that. Anybody else? You guys are very quiet this morning. Am I making an executive decision? We can make this incubating now becomes non-approved, and active are the approved ones.
Note that we have that third name, just to throw more confusion in there. The charter currently describes everything as bootstrap, just because it needed a word to describe things before we came up with these other words.
Just like the TAC.
You can slip in formerly described as bootstrap if you like. Feel free to rename. It's fine.
Okay. All right. So I think we're all in agreement in spirit, at least with naming. So how about the next steps are we take this and then we put this into a formal MD file, and then codify it like Dan suggests in working group lifecycle MD, whatever we want to call it, with these names in there. And then if everybody's happy, we can say yes. Otherwise, if there are changes, we can submit pull requests into that, so that we can at least get this thing moving along. Everybody cool with that plan to go forward? Yeah, cool. All right. Any volunteers to make this into an MD file? Otherwise, I will do this as well.
I could probably do that.
Thank you, Dan. Greatly appreciate it. Cool. All right. I think that was our last agenda item for today. Let's see. Yep. So we got 9 minutes left, which is a first. We usually run over. I honestly expected some of these conversations to go a little bit longer, but so does anybody have any issues or topics that they want to discuss in the next 9 minutes, or do we want to have 9 minutes of your lives back for this Tuesday morning?
I'll just throw out a reminder, which is that we have another deadline coming up in February, which is to come up with the TAC process for who is on the TAC.
Yes, I've been thinking about that. Thank you for bringing that
coming up.
Yeah. In fact, one of the things I just want to kind of put a idea into folks' heads is that as I've been attending some of these various working group meetings, I've noticed, and I don't know if others have seen this as well, but there's a lot of conversations that get brought up around one working group has an idea and they start kind of exploring, and then that begets another idea. And the next thing you know, they're in another working group's territory, which is great because that means, hey, we're all kind of working on the same focused areas, and that's awesome. But then I'm worried that then things will start getting duplicated. So kind of to the point of figuring out how we're going to put people on the TAC officially, it seems like when I was looking at this life cycle, we had a TAC sponsor that goes to every working group. I kind of thought that maybe we should consider having the inverse as well, where we need at minimum a representative from every working group in the TAC. So that way, every working group is at least meeting together at some point on a regular cadence, which would be the TAC meeting, and also makes sense given the intention of the TAC, right? That we would have sort of the leadership, and they don't necessarily have to be the working group leads. I wasn't thinking, they're just some representative from a working group. So that way they're aware of what the other groups are doing. And I think once we move past all these sort of overhead type issues that we're working through, eventually we'll get to where I think the TAC meetings will end up being mostly talking about what are the working groups doing, how are they coordinating together and all that. And that's really what the TAC should be doing. We're just kind of dealing with all this administrative stuff right now. So that was kind of my thoughts on it. We don't have to discuss right now unless folks want to take the time, but that's kind of where I'm thinking we should move with that conversation. But yeah, we do have a deadline coming up in February to decide all that.
So there are pros and cons to that model of using working group leads to form the TAC. I think we discussed this earlier on and decided to punt on it, but some of the problems with that are if we get more working groups than TAC seats, you have to come up with a way to pick. The TAC can't just grow forever if new working groups come in. And that's one of them. And then the other one is it kind of incentivizes the working groups to not accept new working groups because of that same reason.
Yeah, my thought was that the TAC wasn't only the working group representatives. And again, not the leads specifically, but there would be at least a representative from each working group. And then additionally, other folks that either are part of working groups or multiple working groups or, whatever, the reps that kind of like what we have right now. Kind of overseeing everything. Yeah, because I agree. If it's only working group leads, yeah, the issues you described, 100%, definitely a problem. The growing problem is definitely still a concern.
Well, the benefit of collecting the leads or representatives is it would avoid the situation you described where you're having kind of this stepping on each other's toes or kind of encroaching on each other's territory. at least if you had a forum to collaborate and talk about what you're looking at, you can help route some of those things a little better.
Exactly. Yeah, that was kind of my thoughts on it too. Okay, maybe we can make this a topic of discussion for the next TAC meeting as well. We can kind of drive down through some of these models as we work towards making a decision. So, cool. Any other topics that folks want to discuss in the next 5 minutes? Or I'm always happy to give people time back.
Something out there since we have the time. Some of you may be aware that, and I know this has come up in the governing board as well, but I think it fits here, so I'll just spend like 30 seconds on it. We've had some interest in promoting Open SSF through speaking at conferences. And we've had the opportunity, someone had reached out to Mark Cox about presenting at FOSS Backstage, a German conference in February, around kind of the community around open source. And we were interested in perhaps presenting something about securing the open source ecosystem and talking about Open SSF. So we spoke with the organizers of that conference, and they were keen for us to do such a thing. I put this out there. If anyone is interested in being a panelist to talk about security, open source, Open SSF, those types of topics, please let me know, and I'll just collect folks from across Open SSF to submit some names.
I'd be glad to do that, Jennifer. Our working group, the Developer Best Practices, is already talking about how we can target developer-focused conferences to kind of share once we have some materials and more progress.
Oh, that's wonderful. Great. I'll put your name on the list. Is there anyone else at this time that would be interested? All right. Well, you can reach out to me anytime. I'm also going to chat with folks from the governing board, and hopefully we'll get a nice representative group.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. That sounds really, really cool. Okay. Well, with that, I gladly give you 3 minutes back of your lives, and don't spend them all in one place. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. All right.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.